The bridge of the times, Horizon's Edge Times, was quiet except for the soft hum of the engines. Captain Day One sat in his command chair, watching the stars streak past the viewport. His ship had been exploring the outer regions of the Terran sector for 3 months now, mapping new routes and cataloging unexplored systems. It was routine work, but Day One didn't mind. After 20 years in Earth's Navy, he appreciated the peace. His communications officer, Lieutenant Ji Woo, suddenly sat upright at her station. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange. It's a distress signal, but the frequency is old. Very old." Day One turned his chair toward her. "How old are we talking?" "Pre-war standard, the kind the Valine used before they upgraded their systems." Ji Woo's fingers moved quickly across her console. "Sir, it's weak, but it's definitely a call for help." The Valine were a peaceful species that humanity had met shortly after joining the Galactic Council 5 years ago. They were gentle creatures who lived mostly underwater on their ocean worlds. They created beautiful art and spent their days in meditation and philosophy. The idea of them sending a distress signal seemed wrong somehow. "Put it through," Day One ordered. The speakers crackled to life. The voice that came through was barely a whisper, broken by static and interference. "This is Velis Prime. Under attack. The Krath have come. Please, anyone. We have children here. 40,000 souls. The council won't answer. Please." Then silence. The bridge crew exchanged glances. Everyone knew about the Krath Dominion. They were a nightmare species that traveled from world to world, taking what they wanted. They harvested other species for experiments, for genetic material, for reasons that no civilized being wanted to think about. The Krath had destroyed 6 species completely and enslaved dozens more. "Get me a location on that signal," Day One said quietly. "And send the recording to Galactic Council headquarters immediately." "Already done, sir," Ji Woo replied. "Velis Prime is 4 days away at maximum speed. The council should have the message in about 20 minutes. Dr. Subin, the ship's xenobiologist, entered the bridge. She was a small woman with sharp eyes who knew more about alien species than anyone Day One had ever met. "I heard the signal. Captain, the Valine can't fight. It's not that they won't fight. They physically cannot. Their brain structure doesn't allow for aggressive behavior." "You mean they're helpless?" asked Commander Bora, the ship's tactical officer. "Completely," Subin confirmed. "They're perfect victims. If the Krath are there, those 40,000 Valine are as good as dead, unless someone helps them." Day One stood up and walked to the viewport. 4 days away. 40,000 lives. He knew the council would debate and discuss and vote. That was what they always did. The Galactic Council had 47 member species, and they never agreed on anything quickly. By the time they made a decision, it would be too late. "Set course for Velis Prime," he ordered. "Maximum burn. I want to get there as fast as possible." "Sir," Bora said carefully, "shouldn't we wait for the council's response?" "We can listen to their response on the way," Day One replied. The response came 3 hours later. Ji Woo put it on the main screen. High Arbiter Tholvan appeared, his tall blue form standing in the council chambers. He looked like a very thin human covered in scales, with 4 arms and eyes that seemed to look in different directions at once. "The Galactic Council has reviewed the distress call from Velis Prime," Tholvan said in his echoing voice. "After careful consideration and voting, we have decided that intervention is not recommended. The Krath Dominion is a powerful force. Any military action against them could destabilize the entire sector and lead to a wider conflict. The Council votes 43-4 against intervention. This matter is closed." The screen went dark. Nobody on the bridge said anything for a long moment. Then Bora spoke, his voice tight with anger. "They're just going to let those people die?" "Standard Council protocol," Subin said bitterly. "Avoid conflict at all costs, even if it means watching genocide happen." Day One returned to his command chair. "Maintain course," Full speed to Velis Prime. Captain, Jiwoo said hesitantly. If the council said no, and we go anyway, Earth could face sanctions. They might even expel us from the council. Then they expel us. Daewon said simply. Keep going. Back on Earth, in the glass towers of Geneva, Ambassador Hee-jin was having the same conversation with the Defense Council. She had watched the council vote with growing disgust, and as soon as the session ended, she had opened a secure channel home. Fleet Admiral Tae-ho appeared on her screen. He was an older man with gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. He had fought in the Mars Rebellion 30 years ago and had been leading Earth's defense forces ever since. You saw the vote? Hee-jin asked. I did. 43 cowards and 4 species with a conscience, Tae-ho replied. The Valine are going to die if we don't help them. The council won't act. But we can. Tae-ho nodded slowly. I can have a strike force ready in 6 hours. 12 ships. It's all I can spare without leaving our own system vulnerable. 12 ships against the Krath? We've fought with worse odds, Tae-ho said. Besides, the Krath have never faced humans before. They don't know what we're capable of. Hee-jin felt a weight lift from her chest. Do it. I'll handle the political fallout. Ambassador, Tae-ho said. The other council species are watching. They think we're crazy for even considering this. Let them watch, Hee-jin replied. 6 hours later, 12 warships launched from Earth's orbital docks. The fleet was small but deadly. The carrier times Incheon's Fury times led the formation, flanked by 6 destroyers and 5 support ships. Commander Kyung-mi stood on the bridge of her troop transport, watching Earth shrink behind them. She commanded 3,000 Marines, all volunteers who had signed up the moment they heard about the mission. Ma'am, her second officer said, some of the troops are asking why we're doing this. The Valine aren't our allies. We barely know them. Kyung-mi looked at the young officer. You know what Earth was like before we unified? Constant wars. Nations fighting over resources, land, ideology. Millions died because people watched and did nothing while others suffered. We learned the hard way that silence makes you guilty too. She turned back to the viewport. Those Valine sent a distress call. They asked for help. The galaxy ignored them. We're not the galaxy. We're human. And humans answer when someone calls for help. The fleet made the journey to Velis Prime in 4 days. Admiral Tae-ho used the time to study everything they knew about the Krath. It wasn't much. The Krath were big, violent, and numerous. They used overwhelming force and biological weapons. They had never lost a harvesting campaign. On the 3rd day, Dr. Subin gave a briefing about the Valine. She showed images of their beautiful underwater cities, their art, their peaceful way of life. She explained how their brains were wired for cooperation and creativity, but not for violence or war. They're probably the kindest species in the galaxy, Subin concluded. When the fleet finally dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Velis system, the crew saw the devastation immediately. The planet's orbital defenses were destroyed. The moon was surrounded by debris from civilian ships that had tried to escape. Thousands had died trying to run. Captain Daewon's times Horizon's Edge times was already there, hiding behind the moon. He contacted Admiral Tae-ho immediately. Sir, I've made contact with the Valine survivors. Elder Rill is their leader. He's hiding in underwater caverns with about 40,000 civilians. The Krath have 37 warships in orbit and 15,000 troops on the ground. Understood, Tae-ho replied. Good work getting here first, Captain. Now let's finish the job. Daewon managed to establish a connection with Elder Rill. The Valine appeared on screen, his translucent skin showing the blue blood flowing beneath. His large eyes were filled with sadness. You came, Rill said, his voice barely above a whisper. But the council voted no. We heard the transmission. Why are you here? Daewon smiled gently. The council didn't send us, Elder Rill. We sent ourselves. The concept seemed to confuse the Valine. But Species do not act without consensus. You risk yourselves for strangers? This is not logical. Maybe not, Day One agreed. But it's right. And sometimes that's more important than logic. High above the planet, the Krath War Prime Skell detected the human fleet on his scanners. He had led 16 harvesting campaigns, and never faced real resistance. The appearance of 12 small warships amused him, more than worried him. He opened a channel to the human vessels. Unknown ships. You are interfering with Krath Dominion operations. Withdraw immediately, or be destroyed. Admiral Teho's response was calm and cold. This is Fleet Admiral Teho of Earth's Defense Force. You have 1 hour to withdraw from this system and release any prisoners. After that, we will consider you hostile combatants. There will be no second warning. Skell's laughter echoed across the communication channel. 12 ships against 37? You are either insane or stupid. Humans. We're neither, Teho replied. We're just very, very angry. The channel closed. On the bridge of the Times Incheon's Fury asterisk, Teho turned to his officers. Battle stations. Show them what happens when you ignore a cry for help. The hour passed in tense silence. War Prime Skell did not withdraw. Instead, he positioned his 37 warships in a battle formation around Velis Prime, confident that his numerical advantage would crush the foolish humans quickly. He had never lost a battle. Today would be no different. Admiral Teho stood on the bridge of the Times Incheon's Fury asterisk, his hands clasped behind his back. Around him, officers worked at their stations with calm efficiency. These were men and women who had trained for years in Earth's brutal gravity, who had studied warfare that went back thousands of years. The Krath were about to learn that humans had been perfecting the art of killing long before they reached the stars. Split the fleet into 3 groups as planned, Teho ordered. Group 1 stays with me. Group 2, Captain Day 1 has tactical command. Group 3, Commander Bora, you know what to do. The fleet divided. The carrier Times Incheon's Fury Times and 4 destroyers remained in the center. Captain Day 1 took his Times Horizon's Edge Times and 3 support ships toward the moon's debris field. Commander Bora's stealth ship Times, Silent Dawn, Times simply vanished from sensors, using technology that the Krath didn't know existed. Skell watched the humans spread out and smiled. They were dividing their already small force. Foolish. All ships, attack formation. Destroy them. The Krath fleet surged forward like a wave of metal and fire. Their ships were massive, covered in weapons, designed to intimidate as much as to fight. They had won dozens of battles through sheer terror, but terror only worked on species who could feel fear. Teho waited until the Krath ships were committed to their attack run. Then he gave a single order. Launch all fighters. The carrier's belly opened, and 200 small fighter craft poured out like angry wasps. Each one was piloted by a human who had trained in Earth's crushing gravity, who could handle acceleration forces that would kill most other species. The fighters moved with impossible agility, weaving through space in patterns that Krath targeting computers couldn't track. The small craft weren't heavily armed, but they were fast and smart. They dove into the Krath formation, firing experimental fusion torpedoes at the weak points Dr. Subin had identified in Krath ship designs. Reactor cores, engine clusters, command bridges. The first Krath ship exploded in a ball of blue fire, then a second, then a third. Skell's confidence wavered. Focus all defensive fire on those fighters. Destroy them. But the fighters were already gone, dancing away from the slower Krath guns. And while the Krath were focused on the small craft, Captain Day 1 struck from the moon's debris field. The Times Horizon's Edge Times had positioned itself perfectly among the wreckage of destroyed Veline ships. Using the debris as cover, Day 1's crew had attached magnetic accelerators to the largest pieces of wreckage. Now they fired these massive chunks of metal at the Krath fleet, using railguns, turning tragedy into weapons. A 10-ton piece of a civilian transport, accelerated to incredible speed, punched through a Krath destroyer like it was made of paper. The destroyer broke in half, atmosphere venting into space as its crew died. Railgun ready for second volley, his weapons officer reported. Fire at will, Day One said calmly. Make every shot count. While the Krath scrambled to respond to attacks from two directions, Commander Bora's Times, Silent Dawn Times, completed its mission. The stealth ship had slipped behind the Krath lines completely undetected and positioned itself next to the command vessel where War Prime Skell coordinated the battle. Electromagnetic pulse weapon charged, Bora's tactical officer reported. Fire. Bora ordered. The pulse was invisible but devastating. It washed over Skell's command ship, frying every electronic system instantly. The massive warship went dark and silent, drifting helplessly in space. Inside, Skell screamed orders that nobody could hear as backup systems struggled to come online. The Krath fleet fell into chaos. Without their War Prime's coordination, each captain fought independently. Some tried to pursue the human fighters. Others fired at the debris field. A few even fired at each other in the confusion. Admiral Tejo pressed the advantage. All destroyers. Focused fire on the ship's breaking formation. Take them one at a time. Take them one at a time. The human destroyers moved like sharks, picking off isolated Krath vessels with precise weapons fire. Unlike the Krath, who relied on overwhelming force, human tactics were surgical. They targeted critical systems, disabled engines, destroyed weapons. Each shot had a purpose. The battle raged for 8 hours. Space around Velis Prime became a graveyard of burning metal and frozen bodies. Human fighters danced through the carnage. Impossible to catch. Deadly to ignore. Day One's improvised railgun battery turned debris into destruction. And the human destroyers methodically dismantled the Krath fleet, ship by ship. When Skell's command vessel finally restored power, he saw disaster. 29 of his ships were destroyed or disabled. 8 had fled the system entirely. Their captains too terrified to continue fighting. His mighty fleet was broken. Worse, he had not destroyed a single human ship. 3 were damaged, yes, but none were destroyed. 0 losses against 37 ships. It was impossible. The Krath Dominion had conquered 43 worlds. They had harvested millions of beings. They had never faced defeat like this. Skell made the only choice that made sense. Remaining ships, retreat. Full speed. Get us out of this system. The surviving Krath vessels turned and ran. Human fighters chased them to the edge of the system, making sure they kept running and didn't try to regroup. On the bridge of the Times, Inchon's Fury Asterisk, Admiral Tejo allowed himself a small smile. Stand down from battle stations. Secure the orbital space. And get me a damage report. The reports came in quickly. 3 destroyers had hull damage. 47 human fighters were damaged. 12 destroyed. Total casualties: 34 dead, 93 wounded. It was a heavy price, but they had won. Velis Prime was safe from the Krath fleet. Sir, Jiwoo said from her communications station. I'm getting a transmission from War Prime Skell. It's not directed at us. It's a priority message to the Krath homeworld. What does it say? Jiwoo listened, her translation software working quickly. Her face went pale. He's warning them about us. He says we're something new. Something dangerous. He's telling them that humans fight like nothing they've encountered before. Tejo nodded slowly. Good. Let them be afraid. Maybe next time they'll think twice before attacking peaceful species. Down on Velis Prime's surface, the situation was different. While the space battle raged above, 15,000 Krath ground troops had been busy. They had captured coastal settlements and were harvesting Veline civilians, loading them onto transport ships for genetic experimentation. Commander Kyung-mi stood on the bridge of her troop transport, watching the planet's surface through tactical displays. Her 3,000 Marines were ready, their weapons loaded, their armor sealed. They had been waiting for the orbital battle to finish. Now, it was their turn. All platoons, Listen up, she said over the general channel. The Krath down there have hostages. Thousands of them. We cannot just blast our way in. This will be close combat, building by building, street by street. Use your training. Watch your fire zones. Remember, we're here to save lives, not just take them. The transports descended through the atmosphere, their heat shields glowing red. The planet below was beautiful, mostly ocean, with chains of islands covered in strange vegetation. The Veline cities were built partially underwater, beautiful structures of coral and glass that sparkled in the sunlight. Or, they had been beautiful. Now they were occupied war zones. Lieutenant Min Su led the first reconnaissance team down. His squad of 12 Marines hit the beach of the largest island just after dawn. The beach was empty, except for the marks where Krath landing craft had churned up the sand. "Sir," one of his Marines whispered, "I hear something. Coming from the water." They raised their weapons, ready for anything. But what emerged from the gentle waves was not a Krath soldier. It was a Veline civilian, a young one by the look of her small size. She was terrified, her translucent skin showing her racing heartbeat. Min Su knelt down and lowered his weapon. "It's okay. We're here to help. I'm Lieutenant Min Su, Earth Defense Force. Can you understand me?" The young Veline nodded slowly. You came. The elder said you would. But I didn't believe. Humans are real. You answered our call. Where are the Krath soldiers?" Min Su asked gently. "In the city center. They have taken everyone to the plaza. Thousands of my people. They hurt anyone who resists." Tears flowed down her face, mixing with the seawater. "Please help them." "We will," Min Su promised. "Can you show us how to reach the city without being seen?" The young Veline nodded. "There are underwater tunnels. We use them to move between buildings. The Krath do not know about them. They cannot swim like we can." Min Su smiled. "Neither can most species. But humans can. Show us the way." The Veline led them to an entrance hidden beneath the waves. Min Su and his team activated their rebreathers, simple devices that allowed humans to breathe underwater for several hours. It was technology that seemed primitive to most spacefaring species, but the Krath had never needed it. They came from a dry world and avoided water. That was about to become their biggest mistake. Under the young Veline's guidance, Min Su's team swam through the tunnel network. The tunnels were beautiful, carved through living coral that glowed with soft bioluminescence. They emerged inside the city, behind Krath defensive positions. "Command, this is Recon 1, Min Su reported. "We're inside the city. Krath forces have not detected us. Requesting permission to begin guerrilla operations." Kyungmi's voice came back immediately. "Permission granted. Hit their supply lines and communication posts. Make them scared of the dark." For the next 3 days, Min Su's teams became ghosts. They struck from the water, hitting Krath supply convoys and disappearing before reinforcements arrived. They destroyed communication arrays, cutting off Krath units from each other. They used tactics developed in Earth's jungles and cities, fighting dirty and smart. Sergeant Hae-won led a team that specialized in demolitions. She planted explosives under Krath ammunition depots, timing the charges to go off in sequence, making the Krath think they were under attack from multiple directions at once. The Krath troops grew paranoid. Every shadow might hide a human. Every sound could be an attack. They started firing at nothing, wasting ammunition and hitting their own soldiers by accident. Dr. Subin worked with Veline survivors in the underground caverns, using their knowledge to create maps of the city and identify where civilians were being held. She also treated wounded Veline, working alongside their own healers to save lives. "The Krath don't understand," Elder Rill said to her one day. "They thought this would be easy. They thought we were helpless prey. They didn't expect anyone to care." Subin looked up from her medical work. "That's their weakness, Elder. They think kindness is weakness. They don't understand that the strongest warriors are the ones fighting for others." On the fourth day after landing, Commander Kyung-mi received word that the Krath ground commander, Vex Nar, was growing desperate. He had gathered 2,000 Veline civilians in the central plaza and was threatening to execute them unless all human forces withdrew immediately. Kyung-mi stood on a hilltop overlooking the plaza, using long-range optics to assess the situation. The Veline civilians were huddled together, surrounded by Krath soldiers with weapons ready. Vex Nar stood on a platform, shouting demands toward the sky. Her second officer approached. "Ma'am, we have sniper teams in position. We can take out Vex Nar and maybe 30 of his officers before they react, and the other 200 Krath soldiers will massacre the hostages," Kyung-mi said. She opened a general broadcast channel that she knew the Krath would intercept. She spoke in clear, simple language. "Krath soldiers, this is Commander Kyung-mi of the Human Forces. I want to talk to you, not your officers. You're soldiers. You follow orders. We understand that. But your commanders see you as expendable. The ships that brought you here fled 3 days ago when we destroyed your fleet. Check your long-range communications. You've been abandoned. Your War Prime Skell is probably dead by now." The broadcast continued across all Krath military frequencies. Commander Kyung-mi's voice was calm but firm as she spoke directly to the soldiers below. "We know your culture rewards strength, but what strength is there in killing defenseless civilians? Your commanders abandoned you. They ran like cowards. You're the ones they left behind to die." In the plaza, confusion spread through the Krath ranks. Soldiers began checking their communication devices, trying to reach their fleet. They found nothing but static and silence. The truth of Kyung-mi's words slowly sank in. Their ships were gone. War Prime Skell had fled. They were stranded on this world, with no way home. Vex Nar, the ground commander, saw his troops wavering. He was a brutal leader who ruled through fear. "Ignore the human lies. They are trying to weaken your resolve. Any soldier who questions orders will be executed for cowardice." To prove his point, Vex Nar drew his sidearm and shot 3 of his own soldiers who had been checking their communications. The bodies fell to the ground, and the other Krath troops stepped back in shock. It was exactly the wrong move. Sergeant Hae-won watched through her scope from a rooftop half a mile away. "Commander, Vex Nar just killed 3 of his own troops. The other soldiers look angry." Kyung-mi nodded slowly. "Give them one more push." She opened the channel again. "Krath soldiers, you just saw what your commander thinks of you. You're tools to him. Disposable. But we don't see you that way. We see soldiers who were following orders. Surrender now, and you will be treated as prisoners of war under galactic conventions. You will be fed, given medical care, and eventually returned to your homeworld. Or you can keep following a commander who shoots his own troops. Your choice." In the plaza, the mood shifted. Krath soldiers looked at each other, then at Vex Nar, then at the Veline civilians they were supposed to be guarding. Some of them had been soldiers for many years. They had followed orders on dozens of worlds. But they had never been abandoned before. They had never seen their commanders murder their own troops. One soldier, a lower-ranked trooper named Kex, lowered his weapon. "I'm done. The humans are right. We've been left to die here." "Traitor!" Vex Nar screamed, raising his pistol toward Kex. He never got the shot off. Sergeant Hae-won's rifle spoke once from her distant position. The bullet crossed half a mile in less than 2 seconds and struck Vex Nar's weapon, shattering it and breaking 3 of his fingers. The Krath commander howled in pain and rage. That single shot changed everything. The Krath soldiers saw that the humans could have killed Vex Nar, but chose not to. They saw precision. They saw control. They saw a kind of warfare they had never encountered before, where the enemy could show mercy even in the middle of battle. More weapons were lowered. Then more. Within 5 minutes, over half of the Krath troops in the plaza had surrendered. Some fled into the wilderness. A small group of loyalists stayed with Vexnar and fought to the death. But they were quickly overwhelmed by human marines who moved in from multiple directions. The Valine civilians were freed. Elder Rill emerged from hiding to see his people being treated by human medics, given water and food, and comforted by marines who spoke softly and moved carefully so as not to frighten them. Lieutenant Min-Su helped an elderly Valine to his feet, supporting the frail being as they walked toward a medical station. "You're safe now, grandfather. We're going to take care of you." The elderly Valine looked up at the human with wonder. "You came so far. You risked so much. For us. Why?" Min-Su thought about the question. "Because that's what people should do for each other. Help when help is needed. It's not complicated. It is to everyone else in the galaxy," the Valine replied. Over the next week, human forces cleared the remaining Kroth presence from Velis Prime. Some Kroth soldiers continued to resist, fighting from fortified positions. Others tried to escape into the wild regions of the planet. But most surrendered once they realized the humans meant what they said about treating prisoners fairly. Commander Kyung-mi set up a prisoner processing center in one of the intact Valine buildings. The captured Kroth soldiers were given medical treatment, adequate food, and shelter. It was more than they would have given to captives, and they knew it. "Why do you do this?" one Kroth prisoner asked a human guard. "We would have killed you. We would have harvested your people. Why show us mercy?" The guard, a young Marine named Private Dongmin, shrugged. "Because we're better than you. Not because we're stronger. Because we choose to be better." Dr. Subin spent her days treating both Valine civilians and wounded Kroth prisoners. She worked tirelessly, moving between patients without discrimination. One day, Elder Rill found her in a medical tent, treating a Kroth soldier who had been injured in the fighting. "You heal even our enemies," Rill observed. Subin looked up from her work. "He's not fighting anymore. He's just a patient now. My job is to heal, not to judge." "Humanity is strange," Rill said softly. "You are fierce warriors who fight with great skill. But you are also healers. Protectors. How can you be both?" "Feng. We learned the hard way," Subin replied. "Earth taught us to be tough. But being tough doesn't mean being cruel. The strongest person is the one who can show mercy when they have the power to destroy." By the 11th day after landing, Velis Prime was secured. The cost had been heavy. 127 human casualties, with 34 dead and 93 wounded. Approximately 8,000 Kroth troops were dead or captured. And tragically, 6,000 Valine civilians had been lost, killed in the initial attack, or during the chaos of battle. Captain Day 1 stood with Elder Rill at a memorial site the Valine had created. It was a simple place by the shore, where the water met the land. Thousands of small lights floated on the waves, each one representing a lost life. "We are grateful," Rill said quietly. "But we are also confused. You barely knew us before this. You have lost your own people saving ours. We cannot understand why you would do this." Day 1 watched the lights drift on the gentle waves. 500 years ago, Earth was divided. Humans fought each other constantly. We had weapons that could destroy our whole world, and we almost used them. We were on the edge of destroying ourselves. He paused, remembering history lessons from his childhood. But some people chose differently. They chose to help instead of harm, to build instead of destroy. Slowly, we learned that we were stronger together than apart. We unified. We stopped fighting each other and started working together. "And now you do the same for others," Rill said. "Now we try to," Day 1 corrected. "We're not perfect. We still make mistakes. But we learned that if you have the power to help and you choose not to, you're part of the problem. Someone has to stand up. Someone has to answer when others call for help." Rill's eyes, large and expressive, filled with tears. "The galaxy is not ready for what you represent." "Maybe not," Day 1 agreed. "But they're going to have to get ready. Because we're not going away." Far across the galaxy, on the Galactic Council's central station. The news of humanity's victory was spreading like wildfire. Ambassador Heijin walked into the council chambers, knowing that today would be difficult. The other species were already gathered, their representatives talking in hushed whispers. High Arbiter Thulvan stood at the center podium, his scaled face showing clear anger. Ambassador Heijin of Earth, you stand before this council, accused of gross violation of council protocols. Your species was explicitly instructed not to interfere at Velis Prime, yet you sent military forces anyway. You engaged in acts of war without council approval. How do you answer these charges? Heijin walked to the speaker's platform. She looked around at the assembled representatives. Some looked angry. Some looked afraid. A few looked curious. She took a deep breath and spoke clearly. High Arbiter, members of the Council, I will answer your questions honestly. Yes, humanity sent military forces to Velis Prime. Yes, we engaged Krath forces in battle. And yes, we did this without Council approval. Murmurs filled the chamber. Thulvan raised one of his four hands. You admit this freely? You understand you have violated the most fundamental rules of this council? And tensity, another. Tensity. 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 I understand what you consider violations, Heijin replied. But let me ask you a question. When the Veline sent their distress call, what did you do? You voted. You debated. You considered political consequences. And while you were considering, 40,000 innocent beings were facing death. The situation was complex, another representative said. The Krath Dominion is powerful. Intervention could have led to wider conflict. Heijin's voice grew harder. Complex? It was simple. People needed help. You could provide that help. You chose not to because it was inconvenient. Because it was risky. Because it might upset the political balance. We maintain stability, Thulvan argued. The galaxy has been at peace for 300 years because we avoid unnecessary conflicts. Peace? Heijin's laugh was bitter. Tell that to the 43 species the Krath have harvested. Tell that to the millions of beings they have tortured and experimented on. You call it peace. I call it cowardice, dressed up in diplomatic language. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives shouted at each other. Some demanded humanity be expelled from the council immediately. Others called for sanctions. A few remained silent, their expressions thoughtful. Thulvan's voice boomed over the chaos. Order! This council will have order. When the chamber quieted, he turned back to Heijin. Your words are inflammatory and disrespectful. You seem to have no understanding of how galactic politics work. You're right, Heijin said. I don't understand how you can watch genocide happen and call it political wisdom. I don't understand how you can ignore screams for help and call it maintaining stability. Maybe I don't understand galactic politics, but I understand right and wrong. And what happened at Velis Prime was wrong. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many representatives as possible. Humanity is new to this council. We're still learning how things work out here among the stars. But we brought something with us from Earth. We brought the understanding that with power comes responsibility. We have the ability to help. That means we have the duty to help. Even if it means war? Thulvan challenged. Even then, Heijin confirmed. We would rather fight for what's right than stand aside for what's convenient. If that makes us unfit for this council, then so be it. But we won't apologize for having a conscience. She turned and walked out of the chamber. Behind her, the council dissolved into chaos once more. But as she left, she noticed something. A few representatives were nodding. Not many, but a few. It was a start. Back on Velis Prime, the human forces were preparing to depart. The Veline had asked if some humans could stay to help rebuild, and Admiral Teho had agreed to leave a small garrison. Captain Day One volunteered to remain as Earth's first ambassador to Velis Prime. The Marines assembled for departure, their armor cleaned, their weapons secured. They had done what they came to do. The Veline lined the shore to watch them leave. Thousands of civilians who had been saved. A young Veline named Mora approached Commander Kyungmi, carrying something carefully in her small hands. It was a drawing, made with natural pigments on a piece of kelp paper. The drawing showed humans and Veline together, holding hands beneath a bright sun. "This is for you," Mora said in halting English. "Thank you for answering. Thank you for coming." Kyungmi knelt down and accepted the gift. She felt tears sting her eyes but held them back. "You're welcome, little one. If you ever need help again, call us. We'll answer." "Always?" Mora asked. "Always," Kyungmi promised. As the human ships lifted off and climbed toward orbit, Elder Rill stood with Captain Day 1, watching them go. "Your people have changed something today. The other species are watching, some with fear, some with hope. The galaxy will never be the same." Day 1 nodded. "Good. It needed changing." News of the human victory at Velis Prime spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Communication networks buzzed with recordings of the battle, interviews with survivors, and endless debates about what it all meant. The Galactic Council had existed for 800 years. In all that time, no single species had defied their ruling so completely and succeeded so spectacularly. On Earth, Fleet Admiral Taeho stood in his office overlooking the Geneva spaceport. The returning ships were landing one by one, their crews tired, but proud. He had just finished reading the casualty reports for the third time. 34 names, 34 families he would have to visit, 34 funerals with full military honors. His aide, Colonel Insu, entered with a datapad. "Sir, the Council is demanding Ambassador Heejin return to answer for our actions. They're threatening sanctions, trade restrictions, possibly even expulsion from the Council." "Let them threaten," Taeho said quietly. "How are our people? The wounded are being treated at the orbital medical station." "Morale is high, sir. The crews know what they accomplished. They saved 40,000 lives." Bina, Bina, Taeho nodded. "Make sure every person on those ships gets proper recognition. And Insu? Start preparing our fleet for increased readiness. The Kroth won't forget this. Neither will anyone else. Neither will anyone else. Neither will anyone else. Neither will anyone else." "You think there will be retaliation?" "I'm certain of it," Taeho replied. "We just showed the galaxy that Earth's military is not to be underestimated. That makes us either valuable allies or dangerous enemies. Either way, people will test us." On the Council station, the emergency session continued for 3 days. Representatives argued endlessly about the human question. High Arbiter Thol Van led the traditionalist faction, demanding immediate punishment for Earth's unauthorized military action. "The humans violated every principle this council stands for," Thol Van declared. "They acted unilaterally. They engaged in warfare without approval. They ignored our direct orders. If we allow this to stand, the entire council system collapses. Every species will believe they can ignore our rulings." Councillor Wex of the Traders Guild represented a different perspective. Wex was a practical being who cared more about profit than principle. "The humans demonstrated military capability far beyond what we assessed. They defeated a Krath fleet with minimal losses. That changes the strategic balance significantly. Perhaps sanctions are less wise than negotiation." A third faction was emerging, though it remained small. The Veline had sent their first representative to the council, a young diplomat named Lyra, who had survived the attack on Velis Prime. She stood before the assembly and spoke with quiet conviction. "The council voted to let my people die. The council chose politics over lives. The humans chose differently. They risked everything to save strangers. And you dare to punish them for having courage you lack?" The chamber fell silent. It was unprecedented for such a junior member to speak so bluntly. Thol Van's scales flushed dark with anger. "You are new to this council," Representative Lyra. You do not understand the complexities involved. I understand that my family is alive because humans answered our call, Lyra replied. I understand that the Council's complexity is just another word for cowardice. The humans showed the galaxy what real civilization looks like. It looks like sacrifice. It looks like justice. Other representatives began speaking up. A few supported Lyra's position. The Avian Skyborn Confederacy had always been uncomfortable with the Council's passive stance. The Centauros mining clans respected strength and recognized it in humanity's actions. Even some of the traditionally neutral species were reconsidering their positions. The Council was fracturing, and everyone knew it. Meanwhile, across the galaxy in the Krath Dominion's capital world, a very different conversation was taking place. Supreme Overseer Creshan stood in her throne room, watching the recording of the battle at Velis Prime for the 5th time. War Prime, Skell, knelt before her, his head bowed, awaiting judgment. You lost 37 ships to 12, Creshan said, her voice cold. You retreated from an inferior force. You abandoned 15,000 ground troops. Explain. Skell kept his eyes on the floor. Supreme Overseer, the humans fight differently than any species we have encountered. They use tactics we do not understand. Their pilots move with impossible precision. Their weapons struck with perfect accuracy. It was as if they had been preparing for this battle for their entire existence. They are a young species, Creshan said. Barely 2 centuries in space. How can they be so effective? Their planet is classified as a Class 9 death world, Skell explained. The highest danger rating. Everything on their world tried to kill them as they evolved. They developed by fighting their environment, fighting disease, fighting each other. War is not something they learned recently. War is in their blood. Creshan considered this. The Krath Dominion had built its power on overwhelming force. They harvested weak species who could not resist. The humans were neither weak nor passive. They were something new in the galactic landscape, something that did not fit the established patterns. What do you recommend? She asked. Skell raised his head slightly. Supreme Overseer, we have 2 choices. Accept the loss of Velis Prime and avoid the humans, or commit overwhelming force to destroy them completely. There is no middle ground. The humans will not negotiate. They will not back down. They must be crushed or avoided. Creshan's mandibles clicked together, a sign of deep thought. The Council will protect them. Earth is a member species. The Council is weak, Skell countered. They voted against intervention. The humans acted alone. If we strike at Earth directly, the Council may not defend them. Scene 17. Ground 1717. Dumba. It was a gamble. But Creshan was a gambler by nature. She had built the Dominion through calculated risks. Assemble the 2nd harvesting fleet. 120 ships. We will teach these humans what happens when they interfere with Krath business. And War Prime Skell? Asked her second in command. Creshan looked at the kneeling figure. Execute him. Failure cannot be tolerated. The execution was carried out immediately. Creshan watched without emotion, then turned to her commanders. Send the fleet to Velis Prime. The humans think they won. Show them they only invited destruction. Back on Earth, Intelligence Officer Ji Woo intercepted the Krath communications 3 days later. She immediately contacted Admiral Taeho with the news. Sir, Krath's 2nd Fleet is being assembled. Long-range sensors confirm 120 warships gathering at their staging point. Projected course is toward Velis Prime. Taeho felt his blood run cold. 120 ships. The humans had barely survived against 37. Time? Until they arrive? Approximately 10 days at maximum speed. Get me Ambassador Heejin. And start recalling every ship we can spare. We're going to need everything we have. Within hours, Earth's orbital shipyards were buzzing with activity. Ships being refitted were rushed back into service. Crews on leave were recalled. The Tangent-class carrier times Dokdo *, humanity's newest and largest warship, was still undergoing final tests, but Admiral Taeho ordered it deployed anyway. Vice Admiral Sun Mi would command the relief fleet. She was younger than Taeho, but had proven herself during the Mars Rebellion. She stood on the bridge of the Times Dokdo *, watching as 40 ships assembled around her flagship. "It's not enough, is it?" her executive officer asked quietly. "No," Sun Mi admitted, "but it's what we have. And it will have to be enough." 7. On Velis Prime, Captain Day 1 received the warning with grim determination. Admiral Taeho had left behind a small defensive force when the main fleet returned to Earth. Now Day 1 had 13 ships and the knowledge that an overwhelming Kroth force was coming for revenge. He called a meeting with his senior officers and Elder Rill. "The Krath are coming back. A lot of them. We can evacuate your people, Elder. Get them off-world before the fleet arrives." Rill shook his head slowly. "Where would we go? This is our home. Besides, running would dishonor the sacrifice your people made to save us. Staying might mean death," Daewon said bluntly. "Then we die in our home, standing beside our friends," Rill replied. "The Veline cannot fight, Captain. But we can help in other ways. Our scientists have been studying the system's gravitational patterns for centuries. We can provide detailed maps, help you predict movement patterns, find advantages." Commander Bora leaned forward. "What kind of advantages?" Over the next few days, Veline scientists worked with human tactical officers. They revealed things about the Velis system that had never been shared before. Unusual gravitational eddies near the outer planets, asteroid fields with strange magnetic properties, areas where sensor readings became unreliable. Dr. Subin coordinated the joint effort. The Veline know this system better than anyone. They've been observing it for thousands of years. This data could make the difference. "Could, but probably won't," Day 1 said quietly when they were alone. "We're talking about 13 ships against 120. Even with perfect knowledge of the terrain, the math doesn't work in our favor. Since when do humans care about the math?" Subin asked with a slight smile. "We do impossible things. That's kind of our specialty. Meanwhile, unexpected help was arriving. 3 council species had quietly sent ships to Velis Prime. They claimed the vessels were private security forces or independent volunteers. Transparent fictions that allowed them to avoid council sanctions while supporting the humans. Captain Nera of the Skyborn Confederacy arrived with 7 sleek interceptor craft. Her people were avians, evolved from flying predators, and they understood 3-dimensional combat instinctively. "The Council says we are not here," she told Day 1 with what might have been a smile on her beaked face. "So we might as well fight without rules." The Centauros clans sent mining ships equipped with industrial cutting lasers and explosive charges. "We are just protecting our commercial interests in the system," their leader, Foreman Kex, claimed. But everyone knew the truth. Even a few Veline tried to help. They could not fight. But they could crew support vessels, manage logistics, run communications. Elder Rill himself insisted on staying at the command center, despite the danger. As the days counted down, Day 1 looked at his assembled force. 23 ships total, counting the support vessels, against 120 Krath warships. It should have been hopeless. But Captain Nera said something that stuck with him. "The Krath expect us to be afraid. They think numbers alone will make us surrender. But they have never fought someone who fights for a home they love. My people have a saying. The most dangerous warrior is the one defending their nest." "This isn't your nest," Day 1 pointed out. Nera's eyes gleamed. "You made it our nest when you chose to defend it. Now, we defend it together." On the 7th day, Admiral Taeho contacted Day 1 from Earth. "The relief fleet launches tomorrow. Vice Admiral Sun Mi has 40 ships and the Times Dokdo *. They will reach you in approximately 11 days. The Kroth fleet arrives in 3 days, Day 1 said. I know, Teho replied. You need to hold them for 8 days. Can you do that? Day 1 looked around his command center. At Commander Bora, working on tactical solutions. At Dr. Su Bin, coordinating with Veline scientists. At the display showing their small fleet and the massive force approaching. At Elder Rill, who refused to abandon his home. We'll hold them, sir, or we'll die trying. That's what I'm afraid of, Teho said quietly. Good luck, Captain. Earth is counting on you. The transmission ended. Day 1 stood and addressed his crew. All hands, listen up. In 3 days, the largest Krath fleet ever assembled arrives at this system. They are coming for revenge. They want to prove that Velis Prime was a fluke. That humans are not as dangerous as we appeared. He paused, looking at each person. They are wrong. We are exactly as dangerous as we appeared. More dangerous, because now we are angry. Now we are fighting for people we care about. And when you threaten something a human cares about, that is when we are most dangerous of all. He pointed at the tactical display. We have 3 days to prepare. 3 days to turn this system into a trap. 3 days to show the Krath that humans do not surrender. Not when lives depend on us. Not when we have made a promise. And we promised the Veline we would protect them. The Krath's second fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Velis system like a swarm of metal locusts. 120 warships. The largest attack force the Krath Dominion had ever assembled. Supreme Overseer Crescent stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Dreadnought Times, Harvester's Will, Asterisk, and smiled with satisfaction. This time, there would be no mistakes. This time the humans would learn fear. Long-range sensors detect minimal defensive forces, her tactical officer reported. Approximately 20 vessels, most of them small support craft. The humans did not reinforce their position. They abandoned the Veline, Crescent said with satisfaction. They realized they could not win and fled. Cowards, after all. She activated the fleet-wide communication. All ships, proceed to Velis Prime. Destroy any resistance. Harvest every living being on that planet. Leave nothing behind but ruins. The massive fleet moved forward, accelerating toward the inner system. But Captain Day 1 and his small force were far from fleeing. They were waiting. Hidden in exactly the places the Veline scientists had identified as sensor blind spots. Krath fleet has entered the system, Lieutenant Ji Woo reported from her sensor station. They are maintaining standard formation, moving at moderate speed. They are not expecting resistance. Day 1 smiled coldly. That's their first mistake. All ships, hold position. Wait for my signal. Let them come deeper into the system. The Kroth fleet moved past the outer planets without incident. Past the gas giant, where 3 human destroyers hid in its turbulent atmosphere. Past the asteroid field, where Captain Nera's skyborne interceptors waited in the magnetic shadows. Past the moon, where Centauros mining ships had spent 3 days placing industrial explosives. Crescent grew more confident with each passing hour. The system seemed abandoned except for the planet itself. Prepare orbital bombardment weapons. We will destroy their surface installations from range. Then land troops to finish the harvest. Supreme Overseer, the tactical officer said hesitantly. Should we send scout ships ahead? The humans demonstrated sophisticated tactics at the first battle. The humans ran away, Crescent snapped. They know they cannot win. Maintain course. That was their second mistake. The Krath fleet reached Velis Prime's orbit and began spreading out to bombardment positions. That was when Day 1 gave the order. All units, execute Plan Deathworld. Show them what happens when you threaten our friends. The mines activated first. The Veline had helped human engineers place thousands of them throughout the approach corridors, using their knowledge of the system's gravitational currents to position them perfectly. The mines were simple, almost primitive by galactic standards. But they did not need to be sophisticated. They just needed to explode. And explode they did. Dozens of Krath ships struck mines simultaneously, their shields overwhelmed by multiple detonations. 3 ships were destroyed outright. 7 more were crippled, drifting helpless as atmosphere vented into space. Before the Krath could react, the second wave hit. The human destroyers emerged from the gas giant's atmosphere, accelerating at rates that should have killed their crews. But human pilots, raised in Earth's heavy gravity, could handle forces that would render other species unconscious. They fired fusion torpedoes at point-blank range into the confused Krath formation. Captain Nera's skyborne interceptors came next, diving from above the orbital plane at impossible angles. Their weapons were lighter than human arms, but they used them with surgical precision, targeting sensor arrays and communication systems. The Krath fleet began to fragment as ship-to-ship communication failed. "What is happening?" Crescent screamed. "Where did they come from?" Her tactical officer was frantically trying to restore order to their formations. "Ambush. Multiple attack points. We are taking heavy casualties. We have 120 ships. Destroy them." But destroying the human force was proving impossible. The small Allied fleet fought like phantoms, appearing, striking, and vanishing, before the Krath could bring their superior numbers to bear. They used the system terrain the way a guerrilla force uses jungle and mountains, finding every advantage, exploiting every weakness. The Centauros mining vessels revealed their trap next. They had spent 3 days attaching industrial explosives to asteroids in the field near Velis Prime. Now they detonated those charges, sending massive rocks hurtling toward the Krath fleet at high velocity. It was crude, brutal, effective. A boulder the size of a building smashed through a Krath cruiser's hull like it was made of paper. Another took out a destroyer's engine section, sending the ship spinning out of control into its neighbor. Commander Bora, leading a strike group of 3 human vessels, used the chaos to devastating effect. His ships were equipped with experimental railguns that fired solid metal rods at relativistic speeds. Each shot carried the energy of a small nuclear weapon. Each shot punched through Krath armor like it wasn't there. "Target their capital ships," Bora ordered. "Focus fire on the dreadnought. Kill their command structure." 6 railgun rounds struck the Times Harvester's will times in rapid succession. The massive flagship's shields flared and failed. Armor plating tore away. Systems exploded throughout the ship. Crescent was thrown from her command chair as the deck buckled beneath her feet. "Damage report," she demanded, pulling herself upright. "Multiple hull breaches. Reactor containment failing. We are losing power." The tactical officer's voice was edged with panic, something Crescent had never heard from her troops before. On the Times Horizon's Edge asterisk, Captain Day 1 watched the battle unfold across his tactical displays. The Krath fleet was in chaos, but they still had numbers. His small force was landing devastating hits, but they could not sustain this pace. Already, 2 human destroyers were reporting critical damage. Captain Nera's interceptors were running low on ammunition. "How long until the relief fleet arrives?" he asked Jiwoo. 7 hours, sir." 7 hours. It might as well have been 7 years. "All ships. Pull back to defensive positions around Velis Prime. Make them come to us, if they want the planet." The Krath fleet began to reorganize. Despite the ambush, despite the casualties, they still outnumbered the defenders 5-1. Crescent, her flagship badly damaged, transferred command to a secondary vessel and rallied her forces. "They are few and we are many," she broadcast to her fleet. "They cannot maintain this intensity. Press the attack. Crush them." The Krath warships surged forward in a massive wave. This time there were no hiding places, no terrain to exploit. It was a straight fight. Numbers against skill. Mass against precision. The human carrier times Incheon's Fury times took position directly above Velis Prime, launching every fighter it had. Captain Young Ho, commander of the carrier, knew what was coming. He could see the Krath fleet forming up for a concentrated assault. His ship would be the primary target. All non-essential personnel, evacuate to the escape pods. Young-ho ordered calmly. Skeleton crew only. Everyone else, get to safety. His executive officer protested. Sir, we need full crew to operate effectively. The ship is already lost, Young-ho said quietly. No point in losing more lives than necessary. That is an order, Commander. Get our people out. Over the next 30 minutes, escape pods launched from the carrier, racing toward Velis Prime's surface. Young-ho watched them go, then turned back to his tactical display. His ship was the biggest, most visible target in the battle. The Krath would come for it first. Good. Every shot they wasted on his ship was a shot they couldn't use on the smaller, more valuable vessels. The Krath assault hit like a hammer. Hundreds of weapons fired simultaneously at the Times Incheon's Fury Asterisk. The carrier's shields held for perhaps 10 seconds, then failed. Energy weapons scorched through armor. Missiles tore into the hull. Internal explosions rippled through the ship. Young-ho kept his hands steady on the controls, manually piloting the dying ship. If he was going to lose his carrier, he would make it count. Set collision course with the Krath flagship, he ordered the handful of crew who had stayed behind. Full power to engines. Let's show them how humans say goodbye. The Times Incheon's Fury Asterisk, burning and breaking apart, accelerated directly toward Kreshon's new command vessel. The Krath tried to shoot it down, but the carrier was already mostly destroyed. There was nothing left to hit that mattered. Nothing except the reactor core, which Young-ho had deliberately destabilized. In the last seconds before impact, Young-ho activated the fleet-wide broadcast. His voice was calm, almost peaceful. This is Captain Young-ho to all human forces. It has been an honor serving with you. Tell Earth we held the line. The carrier struck the Krath flagship at full speed. The reactor core detonated on impact, creating a miniature sun in the middle of the battle space. The explosion vaporized both ships instantly and crippled 6 nearby Krath vessels. The blast wave sent dozens more, tumbling out of control. On the Times Horizon's Edge Asterisk, Day One closed his eyes briefly. Young-ho had been a friend for 15 years. Honor the sacrifice, he said quietly. All ships, press the attack while they are disorganized. The battle raged for 5 more hours. It was brutal, desperate, and costly. Human ships fought with everything they had, using every trick they knew, spending ammunition and lives to buy time. The Skyborn lost 3 interceptors. The Centauros mining vessels were destroyed, protecting a damaged human destroyer. The Krath fleet was being decimated, but they kept coming, driven by rage and the need to prove their dominance. Captain Daewon's Times, Horizon's Edge Times, took a direct hit that knocked out half the ship's systems. Dr. Subin worked frantically in the medical bay, treating wounded crew members as damage control teams fought fires throughout the ship. On Velis Prime's surface, Elder Rill watched the battle through telescopes, seeing the lights of explosions in the sky. Thousands of Veline gathered on the shores, unable to fight, unable to help, but refusing to hide. They sang ancient songs, their voices carrying across the water, honoring the warriors who fought for their world. Then, just as Daewon's force was reaching its breaking point, the sensors detected something new. Lieutenant Jiwoo looked at her display and started crying with relief. Captain, FTL signatures detected at the system edge. It's the relief fleet. Vice Admiral Sun Mi is here. The Times Dokdo Times emerged from faster-than-light travel like an avenging angel. The T-Tangent-class carrier was 3 times the size of the destroyed Times Incheon's Fury Asterisk. Bristling with weapons, surrounded by 40 fresh warships, Vice Admiral Sun Mi saw the tactical situation instantly and gave her orders without hesitation. All ships. Combat speed. The Krath fleet is engaged and disorganized. Hit them hard before they can regroup. Launch all fighters. Show them that Earth does not abandon its own. The fresh human forces crashed into the Krath fleet like a tidal wave. The Krath, already battered from hours of fighting, suddenly faced an enemy that outnumbered them. Their morale broke. Ships that had been pressing the attack suddenly turned to flee. Captains who had been confident now screamed for retreat. Crescent, commanding from her third flagship of the day, watched her mighty fleet disintegrate. She had started with 120 ships. She could count perhaps 40 that were still combat-capable. The humans had broken them. "All ships, retreat," she ordered, her voice hollow with defeat. The Kroth warships turned and ran. Human fighters chased them to the system edge, making sure they kept running. Vice Admiral Sun Mi did not pursue beyond that point. She had achieved her objective. Velis Prime was safe. The second battle of Velis Prime was over. The cost had been terrible. 4 human capital ships destroyed, including the Times Incheon's Fury Asterisk. 1,200 casualties, with 300 dead. All 3 Centauros mining ships lost. 4 Skyborne interceptors destroyed. The small force that had held the line for 8 hours had been nearly annihilated, but they had won. The Krath Second Fleet limped back to their territory broken and defeated. The Dominion's reputation for invincibility was shattered, and the galaxy watched, stunned, as humanity proved that courage and skill could overcome overwhelming numbers. 3 months later, the Galactic Council convened for a historic session. High Arbiter Tholvan was gone, resigned, in disgrace. The new Arbiter, Keln of the Pragmatist faction, stood at the podium with a very different message. "The Council failed the Veline," Keln said simply. "We chose political stability over moral responsibility. We watched innocents face destruction and did nothing. Humanity showed us what we should have been. For that, we owe them thanks, not condemnation." The vote that followed was unprecedented. 17 Council species requested mutual defense treaties with Earth. The Veline proposed humanity be given a permanent seat on the Security Directorate. The Council, fractured and humbled, agreed. Ambassador He Jin stood before the Council, exactly where she had stood 3 months earlier when she had been accused of violations. This time, the mood was very different. "We did not seek recognition," she said. "We sought only to do what was right. But we accept this responsibility. Earth will stand with any species that calls for help. We will defend the weak. We will oppose tyranny. That is our promise to this Council and to the galaxy." The Krath Dominion never recovered from its defeat. Subjugated species, inspired by humanity's intervention, rose in rebellion. Within a year, the Dominion collapsed into civil war. Crescent disappeared, though intelligence suggested she was plotting revenge from somewhere in the outer reaches. On Velis Prime, Captain Day One retired from military service to become Earth's first permanent ambassador to the Veline. The day he officially took the position, Elder Rill presented him with a traditional gift: a living coral sculpture that changed colors with the owner's emotions. "You came when no one else would," Rill said. "You fought when fighting seemed hopeless. You lost friends to save strangers. We will never forget." A memorial was built on Velis Prime's largest island. It was a structure of human steel and Veline coral, intertwined in a way that made it impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Inscribed on its base in 17 languages was a simple phrase: "We stand for those who cannot." The memorial became a symbol across the galaxy. Species who had never considered intervention, who had always chosen safety over justice, began to question their choices. The Council, once passive and calculating, began to act with purpose. It did not happen overnight, but it happened, and at the center of it all was humanity, the species from the Death World, the warriors who fought not for conquest, but for conscience. Mora, the young Veline who had given Commander Kyung Mi the drawing, grew up in a world that knew peace. She became a teacher, educating young Veline about the day the humans answered their call. Every year, on the anniversary of the battle, she would take her students to the memorial. "Why did they come?" a student asked her one day. "The humans barely knew us. Why risk so much?" Mora smiled, remembering the words Captain Day One had spoken to her all those years ago. Because someone has to. Because when you have the power to help and you choose not to, you become part of the problem. The humans understood that. They taught the whole galaxy that lesson. In Earth's orbital shipyards, new ships were being built. The Times Incheon's Fury 2, asterisk, named in honor of the fallen carrier. Destroyers bearing the names of the battles they had fought, and crews training for a future where humanity would continue to be the galaxy's protectors. Fleet Admiral Tae-ho, now semi-retired, visited the shipyards often. He would stand and watch the construction, remembering the faces of those who had been lost. 34 names from the first battle, 300 from the second. Each one a person who had believed in something bigger than themselves. We gave them something to believe in, Vice Admiral Sunmi said, joining him at the observation window. The galaxy was cynical, calculating. We showed them that principles still matter. We paid for it in blood, Tae-ho replied. The best things always cost blood, Sunmi said. But look what we bought. A galaxy that is starting to care again. Species standing up for each other. The Krath Dominion, broken. The Valine safe. That is worth the price. Tae-ho nodded slowly. She was right, of course. But that did not make the cost any easier to bear. Far across the galaxy, on 1,000 different worlds, the story of Velis Prime was told and retold. It became legend. The tale of how humanity heard a cry for help that everyone else ignored. How they came with 12 ships against impossible odds. How they fought and bled and died for strangers. How they changed the galaxy forever. And on Velis Prime, in the underwater caverns where Elder Rill had hidden with 40,000 refugees, there was a new tradition. Every evening, as the sun set over the ocean, the Valine would gather and sing. They sang of heroes from a distant world. They sang of sacrifice and courage. They sang of the day humanity answered with war when all others answered with silence. The galaxy would never be the same. The old order of cautious neutrality and calculated inaction was dying. A new age was beginning, one where compassion had teeth, where justice had warriors, where the strong protected the weak instead of exploiting them. And at the heart of this change stood humanity. The Deathworlders who refused to let the galaxy forget its conscience. They had come from a world that tried to kill them every day, and it had made them strong, but it had also made them kind, because they knew what it meant to suffer, to struggle, to need help. When the next distress call came from some distant world, when the next species cried out for aid, the galaxy no longer looked to the Council for guidance. They looked to Earth, and Earth, every time, answered the same way. We're coming. Because that was what Deathworlders did. They answered when others called. They stood when others fell. They fought when fighting seemed impossible. They stood for those who could not stand for themselves. And the galaxy, slowly, learned to do the same.